with the ship. I was the loneliest person who ever lived. By the time I was 5 years old, for all intents and purposes, I was an orphan. Yes, it's true, my mother was still alive, technically, but you could no longer really call her my mother. In those days, they would have called it a nervous breakdown if they dared to speak of it at all. In any case, I never saw her again. I remember when I started primary school, I used to make my grandmother promise me not to die before I got home. Poem. In the waiting room. In Worcester, Massachusetts, I went with Aunt Consuelo to keep her dentist's appointment and sat and waited for her in the dentist's waiting room. It was winter. It got dark early. The waiting room was full of grown-up people, Arctics and overcoats, lamps and magazines. My aunt was inside what seemed like a long time. And while I waited, I read the National Geographic. I could read and carefully studied photographs. The inside of a volcano, black and full of ashes. Then it was spilling over in rivulets of fire. Osa and Martin Johnson dressed in riding breeches, laced boots and pith helmets. A dead man slung on a pole. A long pig, the caption said. Babies with pointed heads wound round and round with string. Black naked women with necks wound round and round with wire, like the necks of light bulbs. Their breasts were horrifying. I read it straight through. I was too shy to stop. And then I looked at the cover, the yellow margins, the date. Suddenly, from inside came an oh of pain, Aunt Consuelo's voice. Not very loud or long. I wasn't at all surprised. Even then, I knew she was a foolish, timid woman. I might have been embarrassed, but wasn't. What took me completely by surprise was that it was me, my voice in my mouth. Without thinking at all, I was my foolish aunt. We were falling, our eyes glued to the cover of the National Geographic, February 1918. I said to myself, 3 days and you'll be 7 years old. I was saying it to stop the sensation of falling off the round turning world into cold blue-black space. But I felt, you are an I. You are an Elizabeth. You are one of them. Why should you be one too? I scarcely dared to look to see what it was I was. I gave a sidelong glance. I couldn't look any higher. At shadowy gray knees, trousers and skirts and boots and different pairs of hands lying under the lamps. I knew that nothing stranger had ever happened, that nothing stranger ever could happen. Why should I be my aunt, or me, or anyone? What similarities, boots, hands, the family voice I felt in my throat, or even the National Geographic and those awful hanging breasts held us all together, or made us all just one? How, I didn't know any word for it, how unlikely. How had I come to be here, like them, and overhear a cry of pain that could have got loud and worse, but hadn't? The waiting room was bright and too hot. It was sliding beneath a big black wave, another and another. Then I was back in it. The war was on. Outside, in Worcester, Massachusetts, were night and slush and cold. And it was still the 5th of February, 1918. My father's parents took over for a little while, and when they realized that I was being raised barefoot in the mud. Eventually, though, I went to live with my Aunt Maud and Uncle George, and less said about him the better. My father's family at least had the decency to leave enough money so that I could go to decent schools. I met my best friend, Franny, at boarding school, and we both got into Vassar. Got a letter from her here, just about the time of our graduation, to Franny Blau, June the 4th, 1934. Hallie's parents objected to the trip, and as I'm very eager to work anyway, I guess I shall be in New York all summer, except for a couple of trips to Cuttyhunk. When I leave here, I think I'll go and stay at the Brevoort until I found an apartment. I see that rooms there are very cheap, and I rather like it. So, after the 11th, why, if you want to, address me there. I guess I should tell you that Mother died a week ago today. After 18 years, of course, it is the happiest thing that could have happened. It was about this time that I was introduced to the poet Marianne Moore. She's the one who persuaded me that I was a poet. Up till then, I'd been thinking of studying music composition. I'd even been applying to medical schools, but it's just that a poet of her stature could be interested in my work. It meant so much. Although it did take me 4 years to work the courage to call her Marianne instead of Miss Moore. To Marianne Moore, September the 11th, 1940. Thank you again, Marianne, for all the first part of the first letter. It seems to me that I make such demands on your thought and time and almost never give anything in return. I scarcely know why I persist at all. It is really fantastic to place so much on the fact that I have written a half-dozen phrases that I can still bear to reread without too much embarrassment. But I have that continuous, uncomfortable feeling of things in the head, like icebergs or rocks or awkwardly placed pieces of furniture. It's as if all the nouns were there, but the verbs were lacking, if you know what I mean. And I can't help having the theory that if they are all joggled around hard enough and long enough, some kind of electricity will occur, just by friction, that will arrange everything. Got an example of some of my very early work here. Lives of great men will remind us we can mold life as we choose, and departing leave behind us towels, safety pins, and shoes. I am forever losing things. I'm really rather good at it. Bryn Mawr offered me their Lucy Martin Donnelly scholarship. That was $2,500. It was a lot of money in 1951. I was allowed to travel, so I decided on a crazy trip circumnavigating the continent of South America. When I got to Rio, I met up with my good friend Mary, and I only intended to stay there for a few days, but I took 2 bites of the fruit of the cashew and had a violent reaction. My eyes started stinging, and I started to swell and swell and swell. I couldn't see anything for over a week. The Brazilian people, especially Mary's friend, Lotta, just seemed to delight in looking after me. Lotta took me to her house in the mountains above Petropolis. It was just beautiful. By the time I was well enough to leave, we were falling in love. Lotta invited me to stay. She built me a studio next to her house just so I'd have a place to concentrate on my work. No one had ever offered me a home for so much. Lotta's gesture, it meant just everything. The still explosions on the rocks. The still explosions on in love with me now. And then things just seemed to get better and better. Things went so well in my work, and, well, I won the Pulitzer Prize. I was offered $10,000 to write a book about Brazil. And Lotta, she finally got to fulfill her dream of creating a people's park. It was on an old landfill site in Rio. Just beautiful and for everyone to enjoy. I bought an old house in Ouro Preto. Beautiful, the whole wreck of a place. I started doing it up. Things got complicated. There's a letter here from a letter I wrote to my doctor and confidant, Annie Bauman. To Dr. Annie Bauman, Rio de Janeiro, September the 1st, 1966. I am writing this in great sorrow. I really don't know what to do anymore. I tried to tell you some of this by letter and on the telephone, and you said then, of course, Lotta was under great stress, which of course I've known only too well for over 5 years now, and I do try to make allowances for. There are so many complications, half my fault, no doubt, but all I want to say at present is Lotta had such an obsession about my drinking. She'd did almost physically forcing me to take pills, antabuse. It's a punishment remedy. Well, I ran out of antabuse 6 weeks before I left Seattle. I'd gone there to do some teaching, running out of money. I needed to do some teaching in the States. And I didn't miss a single class because of drinking. I was fine. Not a single class. That's better than you can say of any of the other poets who had that job before me. It's true. In the past, I've cheated. But it's just when things are beginning so awful and stressful, and that life in Brazil is just. But I don't lie. I may cheat, but I'm not a liar. Lotta had a complete breakdown. After all the last 5-6 years of overwork, it's not surprising. To Dr. Annie Bauman, January the 20th, 1967. I'm afraid you thought I was drunk when I called you, but I really wasn't. Just closer to hysteria, or more hysterical than I've ever been in my life. I suppose the person closest is the last one to realize how terribly sick someone is. The doctor said I'm not supposed to see her or get in touch with her in any way for at least 6 months. Like a fool, I went to see the hospital psychiatrist too, a most unsympathetic man. And he said 2 years, if ever, something equally hopeful. P.S. My poem about Ouro Preto is in the Christmas New Yorker, I hear. Under the window, Ouro Preto. The conversations are simple, about food, or when my mother combs my hair, it hurts. Women. Women. Women in red dresses and plastic sandals, carrying their almost invisible babies, muffled to the eyes in all the heat. Unwrap them, lower them, and give them drinks of water lovingly from dirty hands. Here where there used to be a fountain, here where all the world still stops. The water used to run out of the mouths of 3 green soapstone faces. One face laughed, and one face cried. The middle one just looked. Patched up with plaster, they're in the museum. It runs now from a single iron pipe, a strong and ropey stream. Cold, cold as ice. All have agreed for several centuries. Donkeys agree, and dogs, and the neat little bottle-green swallows dare to dip and taste. Here comes that old man with a stick and sack, meandering again. He stops and fumbles, and finally gets out his enameled mug. Here comes some laundry tied up in a sheet, all on its own, 3 feet above the ground. Oh no, a small boy is underneath. 6 donkeys come behind their godmother, the one who wears a fringe of orange wool with woolly balls above her eyes and bells. They veer towards the water as a matter of course, until the drover's mare trots up, her whiplash-blinded eye on the offside. A big new truck, Mercedes-Benz, arrives to overawe them all. The body's painted with throbbing rosebuds, and the bumper says, "Here am I, for whom you have been waiting." The driver and assistant driver wash their faces, necks, and chests. They wash their feet, their shoes, and put them back together again. Meanwhile, another, older truck grinds up in a blue cloud of burning oil. It has a syphilitic nose. Nevertheless, its gallant driver tells the passers-by, "Not much money, but it is amusing." She's been in labor now 2 days. Transistors cost much too much. For lunch, we took advantage of the poor duck the dog decapitated. The 7 ages of man are talkative and soiled and thirsty. Oil has seeped into the margins of the ditch as standing water, and flashes or looks upward brokenly, like bits of mirror, no, more blue than that, like tatters of the morpho butterfly. Later. Dear Annie, I'm leaving for New York tonight, looking forward to seeing you so much. However, and this is because I'm afraid of planes and haven't made a proper will, I'm going to ask you to do something for me, and if possible, keep it secret forever. If any of this comes about, you will find that I have left you $15,000. It is not really for you. I want you to send it to a friend. I'm not at liberty even now to divulge her name. Let's just call her Suzanne. She will need it badly, and I feel a heavy obligation to her. Lotta must not know of this. It would upset her horribly. September 23rd, 1967. Lotta came up to New York on Sunday. The plane was 3 hours late, and as soon as I saw her, I knew she shouldn't have been allowed to travel. In fact, I think I'll go back to Brazil and shoot her doctor. Well, sometime toward dawn, she got up and tried to commit suicide. I heard her up in the kitchen about 6 o'clock. She was already almost unconscious. I thought she'd taken Nembutal. There was a bottle of it in her hand, but later the blood test showed only Valium. We had her off to St. Vincent's in 20 minutes in an ambulance. I never thought I'd be so glad to see 4 cops in my bedroom. They think she's going to live. Telegram. September the 25th, 1967. arrival. Stop. Died today. Stop. Trying to telephone you. Stop. Elizabeth. Poem. I am in need of music. I am in need of music that would flow over my fretful, feeling fingertips, over my bitter, tainted, trembling lips, with melody deep, clear, and liquid slow. Oh, for the healing, swaying, old and low, of some song sung to rest the tired dead, a song to fall like water on my head, and over quivering limbs dream flushed to glow. There is a magic made by melody, a spell of rest and quiet breath and cool heart that sinks through fading colors deep to the subaqueous stillness of the sea and floats forever in a moon-green pool, held in the arms of rhythm and of sleep. January the 4th, 1968. I can't remember what I told you of my plans. They were pretty vague. Anyway, I have a young friend, Suzanne, staying with me, and we've decided to try keeping house together for a while. She was married to a Northwesterner, is now divorced, and has a son aged 18 months. She will be able to do quite a lot of secretarial work for me, which I've decided I've reached an age that I need to have done. Well, I couldn't seem to just start living alone straight away. I couldn't bear New York right now, and certainly not Brazil. A letter to Maria Osser, someone who was supposed to be my friend. January the 4th, 1968. Can you imagine arriving at the only home, forgive me for being corny, but it's true, the only home I've ever really had in this world, and finding it not only not mine, I'd agreed to all that, but almost stripped bare. Friends had gone up from Rio, but how soon after the funeral, I've no idea, had taken everything, left me the linen on my bed, 2 towels, 2 plates, forks, knives, etc. This was my home. I left Brazil with a very heavy heart, and I hope I never see Rio again. I'm keeping the house in Ouro Preto. Those last years were so awful, so exhausting. I didn't behave the way I wish I could have often. I didn't realize for such a long time how desperately sick Lotte was. You must believe me when I say we loved each other. Other people do not have the right to judge that. There will never be anyone like her in this world or in my life, and I'll never stop missing her. And of course, there's that business of going on living. It's almost unconscious, something in the cells, I guess. To Freddie Blau Blau Muser, San Francisco, September 20th, 1968. I'm getting homesick for Brazil. Next June, I mean to go back to my old house for 2 or 4 months. If Nixon gets in, maybe I'll just stay. Any old revolution would be better, it seems to me. I took Suzanne to Ouro Preto. She seems to enjoy all this doing up and renovating and mess. I don't. And the locals. St. Valentine's Day, 1970, Ouro Preto, to Freddie Blau Muser. For a long time, we kept all the rooms locked up. The keys are 6 inches long and weigh about a pound each, so this grew very taxing. And things kept disappearing. And if I complained enough, sometimes they'd reappear where they certainly hadn't been the day before. Odd things, of no earthly use to the thieves, like peppermills, saucers, old diapers that Suzanne had brought back to use as cloths. They went for good, and so on. I had a beautiful lantern over the front door, about 10 feet up, and that lasted almost a month. One morning it was gone, the wiring and all, just a hole. The truth is, I really want to live alone. Life as it is just hideous to me. My secretary is very sick. In fact, she had a complete nervous breakdown. I know, I should have realized much sooner. She's a very good actress. I feel most sorry for her little boy, Googie. He's just such a beautiful little child. Oh, I don't think I told you. I'm now the poetry reviewer for the New Yorker, and I've been asked to start teaching at Harvard. I dedicated this to Lotta. Questions of travel. There are too many waterfalls here. The crowded streams hurry too rapidly down to the sea, and the pressure of so many clouds on the mountaintops makes them spill over the sides in soft, slow motion, turning to waterfalls under our very eyes. For if those streaks, those mile-long, shiny tear stains, aren't waterfalls yet, in a quick age or so, as ages go here, they probably will be. But if the streams and clouds keep traveling, the mountains look like hulls of capsized ships, slime-hung and barnacled. Think of the long trip home. Should we have stayed at home and thought of here? Where should we be today? Is it right to be watching strangers in a play in this strangest of theaters? What childishness is it that while there's a breath of life in our bodies, we are determined to rush to see the sun the other way around, the tiniest green hummingbird in the world, to stare at some inexplicable old stonework, inexplicable and impenetrable, at any view, instantly seen and always, always delightful. Oh, must we dream our dreams and have them too? And have we room for one more folded sunset, still quite warm? But surely it would have been a pity not to have seen the trees along this road, really exaggerated in their beauty, not to have seen them gesturing like noble pantomimists robed in pink, not to have had to stop for gas and heard the sad two-noted wooden tune of disparate wooden clogs carelessly clacking over the grease-stained filling room's floor. In another country, the clogs would all be tested. Each pair would have identical pitch. A pity not to have heard the other, less primitive music of the fat brown bird who sings about the broken gasoline pump in a bamboo church of Jesuit Baroque. 3 towers, 5 silver crosses. Yes, a pity have pondered blurredly and inconclusively on what connection can exist for centuries between the crudest wooden footwear and, careful and finicky, the whittled fantasies of wooden cages, never to have studied history in the weak calligraphy of songbirds' cages, and never to have had to listen to rain, so much like politicians' speeches, 2 hours of unrelenting oratory, and then a sudden golden silence, in which the traveler takes a notebook, writes. Is it lack of imagination that makes us come to imagine places, not just stay at home? Or could Pascal have been not entirely right about just sitting quietly in one's room? Continent, city, country, society, the choice is never wide and never free. And here or there? No. Should we have stayed at home, wherever that may be? I've been doing some translation work, and I'm working on a poem by my friend Octavio. It reminds me of the last bit of that poem because it's about the artist, Joseph Cornell. Cornell was famous for making assemblages. He would take little bits of detritus and things that he found and put them together in these lovely little works of art. And they often, almost always, they reference exotic things and travel and parrots or hotels or foreign languages. But Cornell never went anywhere. He never traveled. He never left New York. So is it my lack of imagination that's meant I've had to travel all over the world when he could just create it? Hexahedrons of wood and glass, scarcely bigger than a shoebox, with room in them for night and all its lights, monuments to every moment, refuse of every moment used, cages for infinity. teaching at Harvard. I met a lovely young woman named Alice. She was the secretary at Kirkland House where I was staying. And we decided it would be nice to go traveling together. I started writing a poem for her, the breakfast song. I did tell you I was good at losing things, right? Dr. Annie Bauman, November 29th, 1975. It was good to hear your voice just now. If I take the 9 o'clock shuttle plane, I can be at your office easily by 11. I might fly over the night before, but either way, I'll be there and sober. Please don't worry about that. What I'm writing to ask you is this. Please don't just discuss drinking with me or scold me for any past lapses, please. Of course I know I shouldn't drink. I try hard not to. I have missed only one class in 5 years because of this, and I have never taken a drink before a class. I feel I simply can't bear to hear another word on the subject. I last drank because of other problems. And they are really very difficult and sad ones. And I think you might be able to help me with the worst of them, possibly, if anyone can. That and my physical state of decay, or whatever it is, are what I want to see you about. I feel I can't bear to be made to feel guilty one more time about the drinking. There are worse things, I think. I hope you can help me with them. At least, I'm sure you're a more thorough and careful and smarter doctor than anyone I know here, as nice as they've been. And as you said, you do know my past history far, far better. I also like you a lot better. Alice had left me. She'd gone. It was a lot of things, really. It was complicated. She thought she wanted to marry this fellow, and I started writing a villanelle for her. It's about her. I didn't want to make it too obvious, so. How to lose things. The gift of losing things. The art of losing things. This is by way of introduction. I really want to introduce myself. I am fantastically good at losing things. I think everyone should profit from my experiences. One peninsula and one island, a small-sized town, and many smaller bits of geography or scenery, a splendid beach, a good-sized bay, a good piece of one continent, and another continent, the whole damn thing. One might think this would have prepared me for losing one average size, not exceptionally beautiful or dazzlingly intelligent person, except for blue eyes. Only the eyes were exceptionally beautiful, and the hands looked intelligent, the fine hands. But it doesn't seem to have at all. The art of losing is not so hard to master. Think of that disaster. No, I'm lying. All that I write is false. It's evident the art of losing isn't hard to master. Oh no, anything at all but one's love. Say it, disaster. And losing you doesn't mean I've lied. It's evident the loss of love is possible to master, even if this looks like, write it, like disaster. the one and only villanelle of my life. It is very sad. It makes everyone weep. So I think it must be rather good in its awful way. I never had to find out if losing Alice could be mastered. She came back to me. I don't know what I would have done without her. She did so much for me. She organized me for my teaching, for one thing. People say that my poetry opened up when I was with her. Who am I to say? She was helping me reschedule some classes that I had to cancel because of health problems, and I collapsed. Cerebral aneurysm. Alice found me, sorted everything out as usual. I think she even managed to get my chosen epitaph put on the headstone. All the untidy activity continues. Awful, but cheerful.